Sup, guys? So, back with you as always. Thursday, January 30th. Yesterday had a major regression with a 2-6 day. Could have easily been better than that. Could have easily been at least 3-5. You had LSU coming within a half point. The game was just being replayed, or not replayed, but they had the highlights on ESPN just 2 seconds ago. And LSU was within single digits in the final several minutes of that game. Definitely they could have covered that. You had Ole Miss win and not cover. You had Utah State off to a huge lead early in the game. They blew the lead. They got the lead back, and it looked like they had chances to push that lead again back into the double-digit territory, and they wound up not doing it. They won and didn't cover. An insanely frustrating day, which didn't totally negate the previous day, because the previous day was 5-0, so it almost negated the whole thing, but not quite. I'm still up on the year. I mean, you have these swings like this when you're playing, high volume like this with college basketball. It happens, but college basketball, it seems like it's going to turn around. It's turning around, and then I have another bad day in it. It's just, I fucking hate it, man. I cannot get a grasp on college basketball this year. What can you do? It is the way that it is. Let's get into today. I do have 2 college basketball plays today. It's a pretty big college basketball slate, so I think I'm being pretty selective in these games. I will point out, I think Maine is in a pretty bad spot here against UNH. They just beat UMass Lowell by 1 point. That's a big win. That was on the road, too, I think. Yeah, huge win. 3 straight road wins for Maine. Maine now up in second in the conference above UMass Lowell and Vermont. And who do they have next? Oh, yeah, they do have Vermont next, also on the road. So that's another huge game. So they might just look right past New Hampshire, who is a terrible team. But New Hampshire, I think they're even worse than they look as far as their record is concerned. This is a very bad New Hampshire team. I just can't do it. I'm not going to get involved in it. But it does look like it's a sandwich spot that Maine is in. They're down from 15.5 to 13.5, so some money looks like it is coming in and taking New Hampshire. I'm not going to do it, but that does look to be the case there. And then Vermont is at Binghamton, and Vermont, as I just basically pointed out, they are going to have to face Maine next, and that's going to be a pretty big game. But they're coming off an embarrassing loss to UMBC, so I think they may bounce back from that, even though, yeah, they just played Binghamton at home and beat them. But when you lose that embarrassingly, you might still show up focused in your next game. So I won't touch this Vermont game either. They're up from 2.5 to 3.5, so it almost looks too easy to take Vermont in a way, or to play them, lay the points, but because they are obviously the better team, and they've been the dominant team in this conference for so long, and they're not really now, but the money does look like it's come in a little bit on Vermont. Ohio State is at Penn State. We got Big East, Big Ten action going on here. This is a tough read for me, man. Ohio State, they're coming off not only that huge upset win over Purdue, where I was on Ohio State in that one. I've been on many Ohio State games this year, actually, and I've done okay. But then this game, I thought this is a game where I lost on them. I've actually been on 3 straight Ohio State games. I was right on Indiana. I was right on Ohio State against Purdue, but then I faded Ohio State. They did not suffer the letdown at all, and they easily beat Iowa. Now they got to go on the road and face Penn State, and they got Illinois up next. Could be a little bit of a difficult spot here, man. Could be a look ahead to Illinois. The letdown, the crash may come in this game. And Penn State, I mean, I don't think they're as bad as their record really makes them look. And they're going to be focused with Ohio State coming into their place. The problem that I have is that Penn State just played a really tough game against Michigan, and Michigan is a very good opponent. So Penn State is coming off a huge effort here against Michigan, where they hung in the game. They came back in the second half, overtook them. They took the lead. They had the lead in the final minutes of the game and wound up losing as 9.5-point underdogs. So it's not really a spot where I want to play Penn State either. So I'm just going to stay away. It looks like both teams are in bad spots here. And if that's the case, maybe you got to give a little bit of the edge to the home team. Penn State up from 1.5 to 2.5 with juice. 65% of the cash, on Penn State, with 50% of tickets evenly split. So the money looks like it is coming in on the Penn State side. So market read would say Penn State would be the right side there. Again, I think both teams are not in great spots there, but you do have an advantage with Penn State as far as the tempo contrast here. As Ohio State likes to play a little bit more mid-tempo, maybe even towards the slower side a little bit, and Penn State's going to try to speed this thing up at home, and they may be able to do that at home and kind of throw Ohio State off a little bit. That, and it kind of looks like a weird line, right? Like, this is the type of line where even though Ohio State's been flying under the radar, you got to think the public kind of would like the Ohio State side here getting points as the team with the better conference record, the team with the better name, the better program history. So, interesting one for sure. It'll be a good game, I think. Wright State and Youngstown State is a big horizon battle. This is going to be a big one, man, with both these teams sitting... Or no, not Wright State, Youngstown State. What am I saying? Cleveland State and Purdue Fort Wayne is going to be the big game. This is a pretty decent game, though, as well. Wright State against Youngstown. Wright State just righted the ship and beat Detroit Mercy, even though they're pretty bad. That could be kind of a confidence boost going forward. In Youngstown, the reason why I was going to bring this up is just because Youngstown had a tough, close loss to Robert Morris, who's been playing pretty well. Then they put up 112 points against some non-Division I team. Does that mean they're going to be feeling a little bit too high on themselves? And they did already beat Wright State by double digits on the road. So as I started pointing out, you're getting into the conference situations now where you have second meetings in conference play. And a lot of times if a team lost on their own floor the first time, they're going to want to bounce back and play better in the next game. So we might see that be the case for Wright State here. As, like I said, Youngstown might be feeling a little bit high on themselves. They already wrecked Wright State on their own floor. So Wright State may be the right side in this one. And it looks almost too easy to lay the points with Youngstown, only laying 1.5. The odds makers are actually telling you Wright State is actually the better team, as Youngstown isn't even getting full home court here, even though Wright State has the uglier record. So the odds makers are definitely telling you something with that one. It is a road revenge in-season angle for Wright State, so I do lean to that side slightly. I'm not going to play it. Speaking of road revenge, I do like Central Connecticut against Long Island. Long Island, I think the time has basically come to kind of strike midnight on Long Island. I don't know if I would call them a Cinderella, but Central Connecticut State is the best team in this Northeast Conference. Long Island's been up near the top of the conference, and I think they're going to lose that standing here. They're not as good as Central Connecticut. As you can see, Central Connecticut's up from 3.5 to 4 on the road. So the odds makers are telling you Central Connecticut is so much better than Long Island that they should be laying points on the road like this. And I'm not going to disagree with the odds makers here. The problem I have is that Long Island is coming off a couple pretty ugly losses, including a loss to Mercyhurst, who's playing decently, but they are new to Division I, and they're not a very good team. So I don't really want to come in and fade Long Island in a spot where it looks like maybe they got caught looking ahead to this game, and maybe they will show up focused for this game because this is a big battle between the top two teams in the conference. Central Connecticut, though, as I was just alluding to, Long Island already went into their place and beat them. So Central Connecticut does have a little bit of extra road revenge angle here, and that was a 7.5 point upset in that game for Long Island. So Central Connecticut was favored in that game. Oddsmakers telling you they're the better team in both these games. So I like the Central Connecticut side still in this game. I think they get their revenge here and they overtake first place here. Central Connecticut's coming off a couple easy wins, and they got the momentum right now. So that is the way that I lean in that one, but not a strong lean. There's some other quick revenge angles here. Marshall just went to Georgia State, I believe, and beat them 2 games ago. So Georgia State now is in a little bit of a road revenge spot here, but Marshall is the way better team. They're laying huge points in this one. So not a game I'm really going to consider. Marshall up from 12 to 12 with juice. What else was I going to talk about? I was going to talk about that other big Horizon game, but I will also say William and Mary, I mean, they could be in a little bit of an iffy spot here. They just beat Monmouth, which not a huge win there, but they're having to go on the road to face Campbell, and they got Charleston next, and Charleston is still probably the best team in this conference. That's going to be a big game for William and Mary. So it is a little bit of a tricky spot here, a little bit of a letdown, or not a letdown spot, look-ahead spot, going to Campbell. And Campbell is only, I mean, this line is real close. William and Mary's flipped from a 1-point dog to a slight favorite. Pick 'em price, so it looks like some money's coming in on William and Mary, but the odds makers are telling you William and Mary is not that much better than Campbell, and the line is really close. So with that being a look ahead for William and Mary as well, I would not want to find myself on William and Mary there. And then you do have Monmouth, who I was just talking about briefly. Monmouth just played that really close game against William and Mary. Fourth straight road game for them, and they put in a really nice performance there. Coming off of that, I would not expect Monmouth to have a good game here. They were a big underdog against William and Mary. So because William and Mary almost lost that game, maybe they will actually refocus in their game because they almost lost as an 8.5-point favorite. On the other hand, Monmouth put together a nice performance in that game, and they might just not have much left in the tank here. Even though, yes, I know they're returning home, and they actually beat Charleston at home last time they were at home. So they've been better at home for sure. But I would kind of lean to the Drexel side in that one because Monmouth coming off such a big game there. Drexel is up from 1.5 to 3 with juice. So it looks like some real money has come in on the Drexel side there, driving them up. And that is something I agree with. My first play coming up here, Florida International plus 8.5. I think this is a really difficult spot for Jacksonville State, and they're laying a lot of points here. They're on a roll right now, and they have played a bunch of better opponents recently, man. Beating Western Kentucky, losing to Middle Tennessee, no shame in that on the road. Beating Louisiana Tech, then they had that kind of sandwich-looking spot there against Sam Houston. Didn't suffer a letdown there against Sam Houston. Beat them, then they beat UTEP and New Mexico State. So they've been beating all the better teams in this conference. Now they have to step down in class and face Florida International, who I know they've been beating better teams than Florida International. So it is going to be an easier game for Jacksonville State in that regard. But they're coming off a bunch of big wins, and they got Liberty, and they got the revenge game against Middle Tennessee up next. They have two huge games up next, and Liberty is still probably the best team in this conference. In Conference USA. So I think this is a sandwich spot basically for Jacksonville State. New Mexico State was hot for a while too. That was a big game. It was a road win. So Jacksonville State pulled off 2 straight road upsets. Now they're back home, or they won their last couple of home games as well, although they were closer games actually. They did not cover this number in either of those games, although granted, Louisiana Tech was probably favored against them. But actually, I think I might have played Jacksonville State in that game actually, and they covered for me, I think. So it was a bad spot for Louisiana Tech in that one, if I remember correctly. But now I think we get a bad spot for Jacksonville State here. And for FIU, I think they're in a bounce-back mode here. They've only won 1 game in conference, so they're going to be easy to overlook. But they also just got crushed by Liberty. I mean, no shame in losing to Liberty, but when you lose 82-59 to anybody, I think you're going to be refocused in the next game. That's an embarrassing loss, even if it was to a good Liberty team. So I expect a better effort out of FIU in this one. They're going on the road to face one of the better teams in the conference. I think they'll be focused, and I think Jacksonville State's focus is very much in question here. And if the public comes in and looks at this, they're going to see, well, wait a minute. FIU just lost to UTEP and New Mexico State both at home, whereas Jacksonville State just went on the road and beat both of those teams. So this is really easy, right? This is a complete mismatch, right? You got to play Jacksonville State. They're going to win this game easily. Well, as I keep saying, it doesn't work like that. Jacksonville State's down from 9.5 to 8 now. So, by the way, unfortunately, I did not get the better number on LSU last night, where 13 would have been a push for LSU, and I had them at 12.5. Very, very frustrating there. I don't think I ever saw the 13 or 13.5 in that game. I think it was very brief that those numbers were out there. But back to this game, the line looks like it has dropped a little bit. It looks like the money is coming in on FIU. I agree with it. I'm going to come in and play that side. The other thing about this game is, yes, it is a pacing mismatch. Yes, Jacksonville State is the better team, but Jacksonville State likes to play slower. FIU likes to play faster. So if you're getting the slower-paced team who tends to be more of a defensive team, Jacksonville State, at home, and they're having to lay a bunch of points, that's a little bit more difficult for a slow-paced team and defensive team to try to win by margin like this. So I think that actually is not a bad thing for FIU in this one, even though, yeah, they won't really want to play slow, and Jacksonville State will try to slow them down. But I do think that is the kind of type of spot where, like, you tend to want to look to the underdog in a game that you think might be slow-paced. Jacksonville State, 292nd in tempo, very slow. They're also 104th in luck index, so Ken Baum does have them pretty lucky. And as far as FIU is concerned, he actually has them as a terrible offense, but he actually has them as the better defense. So you're getting the better defense getting points here, and he does have FIU high tempo, 88. But again, I think if Jacksonville State slows the game down, it is going to make it harder for them to cover by margin, even win by margin, even though it should help them win the game. But I don't know if they're going to be able to win by this many points in a bad spot like this. And FIU is way low in luck index. Ken Pom has them as a pretty underrated team right now, 341st in luck. So even though, yes, they are the worst team, I guess a big luck disparity between these two teams. So that I do like. So I will take the points with FIU in this game. That's one of my 2 college plays. So I will do that one. Yeah, I think that's all I was going to say about that one. I don't remember if I was going to say anything else about that, but that is one of the 2 plays there for me. Ken Pom, I think, has the line right around where the number is. I think he has it right around 8 or 9, so not a whole lot going on there. We do have an interesting one with UL Monroe and South Alabama. UL Monroe is probably the worst team in the entire Sun Belt, or close to it, maybe Coastal Carolina. UL Monroe just did the unthinkable, and they just beat South Alabama, who's maybe the best team in this conference. It's either them or Arkansas State, basically. Huge win for UL Monroe. That was their first conference win. Now what do they have to do? They have to go on the road and face South Alabama immediately, right away again. I think UL Monroe is going to be in a letdown spot after that, even though I know it's South Alabama. They're going to want to try to beat them again, but I think it's kind of a zigzag spot. South Alabama, I think they were in a hangover spot. They had played 2 straight games against Troy, who's one of the better teams in this conference, and they lost the second game. It was the second straight road game. I think they just really didn't pay attention to UL Monroe. They got caught. Well, now that happened and they lost to this bad team by double digits, I think you're going to get a full effort out of South Alabama in this one. They're going to bounce back. So I would only look to lay the points with South Alabama in this one. They're sitting at 15.5. It looks like it has moved down a tick to 15.5 with reduced juice, but the only way I would look in that game is laying the points. I was South Alabama. Oh, what else we got? South Dakota State, North Dakota State is just an interesting matchup. Should be a good matchup between those 2 Summit teams there. So a pretty good matchup between 2 of the better Summit teams. North Dakota State is probably favored at home. They're getting the typical 3-point line there. The odds makers are telling you these teams are very close in power ratings. So basically you get the home advantage for North Dakota State. It's going to be an interesting one for sure in that game. Both teams should show up there. That's a pretty big game. That's a good game. We do have Liberty maybe looking ahead a little bit because Jacksonville State's been playing so well recently. Liberty may get caught a little bit. They're coming off that easy win over FIU. Now it's a second straight road game, having to go to Kennesaw, who hasn't been playing that well this year, even though I know they were a tournament team a couple of years ago, but I don't think this is a great spot. And Jacksonville State has been playing well up next, and then Louisiana Tech after that. Could be a spot where Liberty gets caught at Kennesaw. Liberty's down from 4.5 to 3.5, so some money looks like it has come in, taking the points with Kennesaw. I agree with that one. Illinois at Nebraska, another one of the big conference games. Big Big Ten game here. Illinois ranked, of course, but I would kind of have a tendency to look to maybe grab the points with Nebraska in this game if you forced me to have to lean to a side in this one. Illinois is coming off a nice revenge win over Northwestern after Northwestern caught them earlier in the season. Nice win. And they do have Ohio State up next, which may be a game that may grab their focus more than Nebraska's. Nebraska's just completely fallen apart. So Illinois may not fully pay attention to this Nebraska team here, but having to go to Lincoln, really not the easiest thing. Nebraska was playing really well at home earlier in the season, and they have not been playing well recently. But Nebraska's coming off a totally embarrassing loss, even though it was to Wisconsin, who is good, but losing by almost 30 points like that, 83 to 55 to anybody, that is going to serve to refocus you. And Nebraska also lost their last 2 home games to not great teams in Rutgers and USC, and I think Nebraska was probably favored in both games. Yeah, they were favored pretty decently in both games. So Nebraska, they're going to be, I think, in a pretty angry mood here and a pretty big bounce back mode here for Nebraska. Both these teams actually kind of like to play fast, but Illinois likes to play faster than Nebraska does. Well, Nebraska actually plays more of a mid-tempo. So I expect Nebraska will actually probably try to slow this game down, play some defense. Nebraska plays decent defense. Illinois is certainly the better team on both sides of the ball, but in this spot, I don't know that it's the greatest spot for Illinois. They're up from 3.5 to 4.5, but I would lean to taking the points with Nebraska on this one and finally bounce back, as they got to be in a real angry mood at this point. So that is the way that I would look in that game. SIU Edwardsville is coming off a game where I believe they beat Moorhead. Is that what they did? Yeah, they beat Moorhead State, who's been one of the best teams in the Ohio Valley for a while now. They're the class of the conference, basically. And SIU Edwardsville, second in conference standing right now, just got that big win over Moorhead. So they may be in a bit of a letdown spot here going to Lindenwood. They already beat Lindenwood at home by double digits, so I would look to fade Edwardsville in this one, sitting at a 3-point favorite. But then again, Lindenwood is a terrible team. Neither of these teams are good, so I just don't want to put my money on it, but that is the way I would lean. Lindenwood is also coming off a totally embarrassing 32-point loss to Little Rock. And I know Little Rock is a pretty good team in this conference, but still, that was a horrific performance from Lindenwood, so they're probably going to want to be focused after such a bad game. So that is the only way I would look in that game. We got Cleveland State and IPFW, as I pointed out. This is actually the really good game in the horizon between the two teams that are atop the conference here. Cleveland State coming off beating Green Bay, easy win. IPFW coming off beating IUPUI or IU Indianapolis now. So easy win for both teams. Both teams coming off easy wins here. This is going to be an interesting one for sure, man. IPFW is a 5-point favorite at home, so the odds makers are telling you IPFW is actually the slightly better team, even though their record is slightly worse. So interesting when they're laying 5 against Cleveland State. IPFW likes to play pretty fast. Let me see. Ken Baum has them at 97th in tempo in the country. And they score a lot, and they don't play defense at all. Cleveland State is the better defense, so Cleveland State really cannot score. And he has Cleveland State very high in luck index at 26th in the country in luck. So Ken Baum is also basically telling you IPFW is the better team here. And where does he have IPFW? He has them significantly higher, 30 spots higher than Cleveland State. So he's also telling you IPFW is the better team. They're lower in luck index. Both these teams have not faced very difficult schedules so far. The only advantage you're getting with Cleveland State really is that they're the better defense getting points. But IPFW, if they're able to speed this game up and score like they can, they probably should be able to win this game and throw Cleveland State out of their game that they want to play. And then I do have one more play here before I switch over to the other sports. It looks square, but I'm going to grab Oregon plus the points here. And I know Oregon's ranked 16th in the country, so this is a spot where UCLA is one of those home unranked favorites here, man. You know I like to lean to home unranked favorites, but in this game, I do not. I think that the spot sets up nicely for Oregon in this one. UCLA is up from 4 to 4.5, 67%. I think it's 94% of the cash, so I am worried. The money's coming in on UCLA, but I'm going to trust my situational analysis on this one. In Oregon, I think they have multiple reasons to show up and be really focused on this game. I know they're traveling back to the Pacific Coast here, but it's really more like they were already on the Pacific Coast. Then they had this one weird game where they had to go to Minnesota, and they got caught, and Minnesota beat them. That was a bad game for Oregon. Bad, ugly, upset loss. So now they're traveling back to the Pacific Coast. I think that means they're kind of returning back to familiar territory for them. I mean, they're used to playing at UCLA. I mean, they've done this every year in the Pac-12. So I think this is a bounce-back spot for Oregon. But not only that, but by the way, Oregon played UCLA way early in the season before official conference play started, and UCLA went into Eugene and beat them. So this is a road revenge spot now for Oregon. And Oregon, I know they were laying 3.5 in this one at home, and now UCLA is laying 4.5 at home. So a little bit of a discrepancy there. Probably should be closer to UCLA 3.5 in this one, in my opinion. I think Ken Baum actually does have Oregon as the better of these two teams, and I think this is a good spot for Oregon for those reasons that I just mentioned, man. It's a bounce-back spot, and it's a road revenge in-season angle here. UCLA, on the other hand, coming off a couple of nice wins, man. I mean, they beat Wisconsin, actually after crushing Iowa. Then they went back on the road here, back to the Pacific Coast, went up to Seattle, beat Washington, came back down to California, and they beat USC, and that's usually a big game for both teams. I mean, that's a big Southern Cal rivalry game there. Now they face Oregon again, and this might be a spot where UCLA does not actually have total focus, even though it is Oregon coming into their place. UCLA already beat them on the road, and UCLA does have Michigan State up next, which is a huge game against a top 10 ranked opponent. So in a spot like this, it's actually possible that UCLA does not actually have total focus in this game. And KenPom does have Oregon as the better team, as I said, even though Oregon, as I've been saying, they are overrated, they are overranked, but UCLA isn't that good. KenPom has Oregon a few spots higher than UCLA. He's got UCLA as the better defense with a significantly worse offense. And UCLA plays way slower than Oregon. So that's the thing. UCLA is going to try to slow this game down. Yes, I know Oregon's way high in luck index. They also face a very difficult strength of schedule, though. UCLA also pretty difficult and in the middle of the pack, luck index-wise. So both teams, I think, are a little bit overrated. But the thing about this spot also is that UCLA, they're going to try to slow this game way down. And as I always say, as I just said with the other game, when you get a team that's the better defensive team, they're going to play defense and slow the game down. That's not as conducive to laying points. It's more difficult to cover a big number when a team's going to get into a slow-paced defensive game. So as far as that aspect is concerned, I also like the Oregon side. So I'm going to grab the points with Oregon in that one and fade the market read on that one. Fade what looks like a misleading line there. And I'm going to join the square side in that one, and that is what I'm going to do. Let's move over to NHL, where I do have two plays. It's a big NHL card today. I will say my Boston Bruins could be in a bit of a bounce-back spot here. I mean, they just lost 7-2 to the Buffalo Sabres. I mean, it doesn't get worse than that, but they were kind of in a sandwich spot, Boston was, as they had just beaten Colorado. That was a nice win for them. Had to go out on the road for this one game against Buffalo, and they had Winnipeg up next. So I think the Bruins could be in a bounce-back spot in this one. Winnipeg coming off a nice win again. Winnipeg winning. They've won 4 games in a row. Not against great teams, though. They went out to Montreal, beat them. Now they got Boston, who they've already beaten, I think, at least once this year. And they got Washington up next, which is a much bigger game in 2 days. Washington, one of the best records in hockey, so it is possible Winnipeg overlooks Boston, and they might just be feeling real high on themselves after 3 easy wins, putting up a combined 14 goals in 3 games, outscoring their opponents 14-5. So I would look Boston's way in this one, but the money is coming in on Winnipeg, up from 125 to 137, minus 125 to minus 137, 82% of tickets, 90% of the cash on Winnipeg. But I'm going to disagree with where the money is coming in on that one. I'm going to agree with the Boston side in that one slightly, but not a play for me. What is a play for me is the next game up, Montreal. I'm going to play on the Canadiens, who have started turning their season around, man. And this is against an overrated Minnesota team, a team that I keep saying is overrated. You got a Minnesota team with a way better record like this, and Montreal is actually favored. It looks way too easy to grab Minnesota in an underdog price here, doesn't it? With teams where their records are this discrepant. I mean, look at the Wild's record. I mean, significantly better than the Canadiens' record, but the odds makers are telling you that Montreal is almost the better team in this game, as they're almost getting a little bit more than home ice here. They're down from minus 125 to minus 123, but Minnesota's very public with 96% of tickets and only 52% of the cash. So right now it looks like the public is coming in on the Minnesota side, and it looks like Minnesota is a public road underdog in this one. Kind of a dreaded spot for Minnesota here. And Minnesota's coming off beating Toronto yesterday. So I don't think the spot is very good for Minnesota at all, man. I mean, they're playing a third straight road game, third game in 5 days, I guess, all on the road. It's a 4th game in 6 days, all in different cities, because they played at home the game before that. So they've had a really packed schedule here, and they're on a back-to-back off beating Toronto, which is a nice win, a bigger opponent than Montreal is. And actually, Ottawa has a better record than Montreal as well, so they may actually even look ahead to Ottawa. So they may overlook this Montreal team, man. In a spot like this on a back-to-back, it might mean Fleury is going to be in net here, and he has not been as good recently. Gustafsson has been the starting goalie for Minnesota, and he is the better of the two. Excuse me. So you're probably either going to get a tired Gustafsson here or Fleury, a second-string goalie coming in this game. Even though I know Fleury does have the experience, but still, I don't trust him that much. And meanwhile, Montreal has lost 3 games in a row. They had a tough overtime game against New Jersey, mixed in there with Dobes in net, who's actually been good. Dobes has been like a good rookie goalie. So Montreal's goaltending tandem is actually not that bad. With Montembeault has actually been playing pretty well this season up until these recent games. And Dobes, or however you pronounce his name, hasn't been playing that bad either. He's been thrust into the fold as a rookie, and he's actually been playing pretty well. I don't know who it's going to be in this one, and maybe Montembeau again. Montreal at least had yesterday off. They're just staying at home. So the travel spot and the rest spot is a big disadvantage for Minnesota in this one. Montreal's coming off an ugly loss. I know it was to Winnipeg, who's one of the best teams in hockey, but they're actually stepping down in class now from New Jersey and Winnipeg, I think, in my opinion. Minnesota is actually not as good as the record would indicate. I think Montreal could definitely win this game, which obviously I'm saying I'm expecting them to do as I'm laying the favorite price here. Give me Montreal in that spot, man. Washington is at Ottawa. I think Washington's not in the greatest spot, really. They're coming off a win over Calgary. That's not a huge win, but they're coming to the end of a very successful road trip here, and they got Winnipeg up next in 2 days when they return home. So they already have had a successful road trip, so they may not fully pay attention to Ottawa. And they did just beat Ottawa on their previous road trip on January 16th on the road, shutting them out. So they may very well overlook this Ottawa team after also just beating them recently. Meanwhile, Ottawa, I think, is going to be playing with a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder here. Ottawa has won a couple games in a row now. They beat Toronto, which was a big win, and they didn't suffer a letdown, and they beat Utah after that. They've had way more rest now, 3 days off, although having too many days off could disrupt your winning momentum. So that's the only thing that would worry me a little bit about Ottawa. Like, maybe they're going to be a little bit rusty, but I think they're going to be focused on Washington, who's one of the best teams in hockey, and just beat them on their own ice. I think Ottawa's going to be looking for revenge here. Washington's down from minus 111 to minus 107, although they do have 57% of the tickets on them, and 72% of the tickets, are on Ottawa, and 57% of the cash on Washington. So the cash discrepancy looks like it's on Washington, but I do not agree with that. LA is at Tampa. This is a big game. I'm trying to quick hit a bunch of these hockey games, man. There's not a whole lot of NBA today, though. LA, they've lost 3 games in a row, man. And I think at this point they're trying to salvage something on this road trip. But then again, they're on a back-to-back. They played Florida yesterday, which is a game that you do step up for emotionally, and they lost anyway, 3-0. They're playing a third game in 4 days, fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities, all on the road. So it's not really an easy spot for the Kings, even though you think they're going to want to salvage something on this road trip. But you could see some tired skaters here on a back-to-back like this. I don't think it's a very good spot, really. And Tampa Bay is coming off an ugly loss at home to Chicago, which was a return home spot where they had already beaten Chicago on the road during the road trip, and they returned home, and I don't think they took Chicago seriously, and they got completely caught in that game, and they may have been looking ahead to this game. So I think the spot is better for Tampa Bay. When you return home from a road trip and you get caught in a distracted spot like that, because again, as I always say, you return home from the road trip, you have stuff to get done at home, you have stuff to do at home, it's a distraction usually, but if you do real bad in that game, you tend to bounce back and have a really focused effort in the next game. So I like the Tampa Bay side in this one. They're actually down from minus 150 to minus 136, but 81% of the tickets and only 57% of the cash on LA, so it does look like Tampa is an anti-public home favorite in this one. So that's the way that I look in that game. And then we got Philadelphia's in a back-to-back. They just got wrecked in the zigzag yesterday. I said I thought New Jersey would win that game yesterday after Philly beat them the game prior to that. New Jersey easily took care of business yesterday. So Philadelphia's on a back-to-back. The Islanders have been extremely hot, winning a ton of games recently, beating Carolina and Colorado, and they beat this Philly team before that. So they may not take Philly seriously, even though I know this is a start of a road trip, and usually you are focused to start a road trip, but they got Tampa and Florida up next, and they just beat Carolina and Colorado, and like I said, they beat Philly the game before that to actually get revenge because they had lost to Philly the game before that. So I don't expect total focus from the Islanders in this one. They're up from minus 106 to minus 119, though, to start the road trip, and of course some of that is probably because Philadelphia has no rest. They're in the back-to-back, so I don't know what I would want to do with that game, but, well, what I'm going to do with that game is stay away. Oh, actually, I totally forgot. I already talked about it. Tampa Bay is actually a play for me. I apologize. So go back, reread my analysis on that one. Tampa Bay minus 140 in that one. I'm actually playing Tampa. My apologies in that one. And now let's move over to NBA before I get out of here. So, yes, I am actually playing Tampa in this one. You might be able to get an even softer line on Tampa. I know the line's moving against them a little bit, but They look like an anti-public home favorite, so it looks like we're getting 2 anti-public home favorites here. NBA, the Lakers, are they in a back-to-back? No. But they just, what did they just do? They just lost to Philadelphia. So I don't know, man. I mean, that was still kind of a tough game. I mean, you step up for a game like that against Philadelphia. They're continuing a road trip here. 3rd game in 4 days, 4th game in 6 days, all in different cities. And they got the New York Knicks up in 2 days on an ESPN spotlight game. So they may still overlook Washington. They did just beat Washington at home by 23 points not that long ago. So a big, easy win for the Lakers there. So I don't love the spot for the Lakers here. Washington is coming off an embarrassing loss in their return home from a road trip, which I always said, like, you return home from a road trip, it's not the greatest spot. Toronto was actually laying a ton of points on the road at Washington. That's how bad Washington is. Worst team in the NBA, but they're at least in basically as focused a spot as you're going to get here, as they know they just lost by almost 30 to this Lakers team. It is LeBron and AD. They just returned home, and they had a bad game in that return home spot. And as I always say, when you have a bad game in the return home spot, you tend to be focused in the next game. So I would lean to taking the points of the Wizards, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to put my money on such a bad team. The Lakers are up from 6 to 8.5 in this game now, and they're insanely public. 96% of tickets, 98% of the cash. Like I said, I would look to only take the points with the Wizards in that one. Atlanta at Cleveland is an interesting one. Atlanta just played pretty close against Houston 2 days ago, and I had Atlanta. Atlanta's lost 6 games in a row now, but I don't know what to think about that. I mean, that was a tough game against Houston. Atlanta played real tough against Houston, so they are coming off a very difficult game. They hung in that game. They covered for me against Houston. I got that game right. Houston was coming off that win over Boston, so it was a letdown spot for Houston in that one. Atlanta may not be in the best spot here. They are starting a road trip, which I know starting a road trip is usually a focus spot, but it is a 3rd game in 4 days, all in different cities, so that's not that easy. 4th game in 6 days, kind of zigzagging all over the place. Coming off that tough game against Houston may not be the easiest spot. Cleveland is coming off an easy win over Miami. They're actually in a back-to-back, though. They just went to Miami yesterday, beat Miami, who no longer has Butler. Butler is suspended again. Who knows what is going to happen with that guy. Total head case. I don't know what's going on with him now. Now Cleveland is returning home from that win over Miami, so they're in a back-to-back. So not a great rest spot for Cleveland, but the thing is, I don't actually think they're going to overlook Atlanta, because out of all the teams that Cleveland has played so far, they've played almost every team in the NBA now. A couple of the Western Conference teams they haven't played yet, but the only teams that they played this year that they haven't beaten are Atlanta and Memphis, I think is the other one. I forget who it is. No, Memphis they haven't played yet. There's one other team that they played that they've not beaten yet, but the other one is Atlanta. So they've played Atlanta twice, and Atlanta beat them both times. So that's one of the only teams that Cleveland has played this year. They've only played 2 teams. You'll have to look up who the other one is. I forget who it is. But they've only played 2 teams this year that they haven't actually beaten, despite playing them. So Cleveland may be focused just for that reason, because they haven't beaten the Hawks yet. But they're up from 9.5 to 10 with juice, but 84% of tickets on them and only 61% of the cash. So you're laying a huge price with Cleveland in this one, and they are public with less of the cash on them. So I'm not going to do it. And then the game I am actually going to play, even though I know I'm not laying the greatest price here, is I'm going to play Memphis. Speaking of teams that have lost to teams multiple times in a row, I think this is a difficult spot for Houston again here, man. They're playing a 4th straight road game. They've already won all 3 of the other games on the road trip, and now they're finishing the road trip, and they might have some tired legs at this point, man. I mean, look at this road trip. They beat Cleveland twice, Boston, and then Atlanta. And now they're playing a 3rd game in 4 days, all in different cities. 4th game in 6 days, all in different cities, off of 3 big wins in a row. The Atlanta game was kind of a letdown spot, and they didn't cover, but they still played well in that game, and they won the game. So I think this is a bad spot for Houston finally in this one. I think they're going to get caught and lose this game to Memphis. And by the way, they did just beat Memphis not long ago, back on January 13th, and they beat them right before that in Memphis on January 9th. So they played Memphis twice and beat them twice. So they might not even take Memphis totally seriously, even though Memphis has been hot. Memphis is going to be looking for quick double revenge here, because Memphis lost to this Houston team both of those times. And yes, I know in that game where Memphis was at home, Memphis was only laying 2.5. I know this line is up to 4.5. The line is definitely accommodating for the bad scheduling spot a little bit, but I still think it's not accommodating enough for it. I know the line value doesn't totally appear to be there, but I think the Memphis side is the right side here. Memphis has had 2 days rest, so that is being factored into the line as well, which is why Memphis is this big a favorite. But the situation is so bad for Houston, in my opinion, and good enough from Memphis that I again don't think it's being fully accounted for in the line. And Memphis is coming off just a hideous loss to the New York Knicks. They lost by almost 40 points, gave up 143 points. They lost 143 to 106. Yeah, I know this Memphis team doesn't play great defense, but usually they score more than this. That's an embarrassing loss, going to the Knicks and losing like that. I think they're going to bounce back from that. They have a couple days off to refocus after that and think about that game and refocus here. They know Houston beat them twice recently, so I think Memphis is going to show up in this game. They are going to be the focused commodity in this game. Neither team, I don't think, has any real serious injuries in this game, so you're going to get both teams pretty much at full strength here, but again, with the Rockets in a pretty bad scheduling and rest spot and travel spot here. The Grizzlies are up from 2.5 to 5, so yeah, I know it did open at 2.5. We're not getting the best number here, but 4.5 I think is probably where I would cut it off, but I still like it at 4.5. I'm going to do it. The money's coming in on the Grizzlies, 62% of the cash, 51% of tickets on the other side on the Rockets. So it looks like kind of a pros versus Joes scenario where the pros look like they're going to come in and want to take the Rockets, as it looks like there is value getting this many points in a game that looks like it's going to be between two good teams, and it is. But in this spot, Memphis, in my opinion, is the right side. That's going to do it for me. College basketball, Florida International plus 8.5. Oregon, although it's very square, plus 4.5. Hockey, Montreal minus 120. Tampa minus 140. NBA, Memphis minus 140, or Memphis minus 140. Memphis minus 4.5. That's going to do it for me. Tower Gang Toad on Twitter, patreon.com/Tower Gang, and you get all the bonus Tower Gang content. We had another good episode last night. Go check it out, baby. Check it out. Peace out.